Welcome to our channel. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel for more horror stories like this. The City of the Dead. The world was changing, and it was changing fast. It started with a virus that swept across the globe, turning millions of people into mindless, flesh-eating zombies. No one knew where the virus had come from, or how to stop it. Panic spread like wildfire as cities fell one by one, and governments crumbled. Society collapsed into chaos, leaving those who were still alive fighting for their survival. In the early days of the outbreak, people were still hopeful. They thought that the government would come up with a cure, or that the military would contain the virus. But as the days turned into weeks, it became clear that they were on their own. The only way to survive was to band together and fight. In a small town nestled in the Appalachian Mountains, a group of survivors had managed to hold out against the zombie horde. They had barricaded themselves inside an old school, fortifying the doors and windows with anything they could find. The school had become their fortress, and they had made a communal living space in the gymnasium. The survivors were a diverse group, brought together by circumstance. There was Jenny, a nurse who had been volunteering at a hospital when the outbreak started. She had managed to escape the chaos, but not before seeing some of her colleagues and patients turn into zombies. There was Max, a construction worker who had been on a job site when the virus hit. He had used his skills to fortify the school, making it almost impenetrable. And then there was Jake, a high school student who had been on a camping trip with his family when the virus hit. He had lost his parents and younger sister to the zombies, and had been forced to fend for himself before finding the school and the other survivors. The survivors had to fight for their survival, scavenging for food and weapons, and banding together for protection. They knew it was only a matter of time before the zombies broke through. They had already lost some of their own to the relentless undead, and morale was low. The only thing keeping them going was the hope that they might be rescued or that a cure might be found. But as the days turned into weeks, that hope began to fade. They were on their own, in a world that had been turned upside down. As the days passed, the survivors of the small town had to face more and more challenges. They had to scavenge for food and supplies while avoiding the hordes of zombies that roamed the streets. They had to defend their fortress against constant attacks and find ways to stay entertained and occupied in the confined space of the school. Jenny, the nurse, took on the role of medic, patching up any injuries and illnesses that the survivors suffered. Max, the construction worker, worked tirelessly to improve the defenses of the school, constantly adding new layers of protection. Jake, the high school student, helped with the smaller tasks around the school, such as cooking and cleaning. Despite their efforts, the survivors were running low on supplies. They had exhausted most of the food in the school's cafeteria and were down to their last few cans of beans and bags of rice. Max knew they needed to find more food if they were going to survive. He suggested they try to make a run to the nearby grocery store, which had been abandoned since the outbreak. It was a risky mission, but the survivors had no choice. They gathered what weapons they had and made their way out of the school, cautiously making their way through the deserted streets. The air was thick with the stench of rotting flesh, and the only sounds were the groans of the zombies in the distance. As they approached the grocery store, they saw that it was surrounded by a horde of zombies. Max instructed the group to move slowly and quietly, trying not to draw attention to themselves. They managed to sneak past the zombies and into the store, where they quickly gathered as much food and supplies as they could carry. But their luck ran out on the way back. They were ambushed by a group of zombies, and a fierce battle ensued. The survivors fought bravely, using whatever weapons they had at their disposal. They managed to fend off the zombies and make it back to the school, but not without losing one of their own. The loss weighed heavily on the survivors, but they knew they couldn't give up. They had to keep fighting, keep surviving. They were each other's only hope in a world that had been overrun by the undead. The days turned into weeks, and the survivors continued to live in their makeshift fortress, relying on each other for survival. They had managed to find more supplies and fortify their defenses even further. But the constant threat of the zombies wore on them, and the lack of contact with the outside world weighed heavily on their morale. One day, while on a supply run, Max stumbled upon a radio. He brought it back to the school, and they spent hours trying to tune into any kind of signal. After much tinkering, they finally heard a faint transmission from a group of survivors who were holed up in a nearby city. Overjoyed at the prospect of finding more survivors and possibly a way out of their current situation, the group decided to make their way to the city. It was a dangerous journey, but they had no choice. They gathered their weapons and supplies and set out early in the morning. The journey was grueling. They had to navigate through dense forests, cross rivers, and avoid zombie-infested towns. But after several days of travel, they finally reached the outskirts of the city. What they found was a sight to behold. The city was a fortified haven, with tall walls and armed guards protecting the survivors inside. The group was welcomed with open arms, and they quickly settled into their new home. It was a strange feeling for the survivors to finally feel safe, after so many weeks of living in constant fear. They were given proper beds to sleep in and hot meals to eat. They even had access to medical care and entertainment. But their newfound safety was short-lived. One night, while on watch duty, Max noticed something strange. The zombies outside the walls were behaving differently. They were more organized, more aggressive. Max sounded the alarm, and the city went into lockdown. The group soon realized that the zombies had evolved. They were no longer mindless, flesh-eating creatures. They were smarter, more coordinated, and seemingly immune to the weapons that the survivors had been using against them. The survivors knew that they had to find a way to fight back against this new threat. They banded together, sharing their knowledge and skills, and worked tirelessly to come up with a plan. They had to fight for their survival once again. The fate of the city, and possibly the entire world, depended on it. The survivors of the city were faced with a new challenge they had never encountered before. The zombies outside the walls had mutated into more intelligent, organized and deadly beings. They were now attacking the walls and the gates in a coordinated manner. The survivors knew that they had to come up with a plan to defeat the new enemy. Max, the construction worker, suggested building a trap to lure the zombies in and eliminate them in large numbers. He designed a pit filled with spikes and covered it with a camouflage net. They also decided to arm themselves with more powerful weapons and improve their defense mechanisms. The survivors spent days working on their plan, training, and practicing their fighting skills. They were determined to defend their city and defeat the zombie horde. Finally, the day of the attack arrived. The zombies began their assault on the city walls. The survivors fought back with everything they had, using guns, explosives and even makeshift weapons like baseball bats and pipes. They managed to hold off the first wave of attacks, but they knew it was only a matter of time before the zombies broke through. That's when Max's trap came into play. The survivors lured the zombies into the pit, and as they fell into the spikes, the survivors attacked them from above. They repeated the process over and over, eliminating large numbers of zombies in the process. The battle was long and grueling, but the survivors never gave up. They fought until the last zombie was defeated. The city was safe once again, and the survivors celebrated their victory. They had overcome impossible odds and had defeated a new, more powerful enemy. As the survivors began to rebuild their city, they knew that they would never forget the lessons they had learned during the zombie apocalypse. They had learned the importance of working together, of never giving up, and of always being prepared for whatever challenges life may throw their way. The world may never be the same again, but the survivors knew that they were stronger for having survived it. They had created a new community, one that was built on trust, friendship, and the shared experience of surviving the unthinkable. Thank you for listening. We really hope you liked it. Please leave a comment, subscribe and like the video to encourage us to keep going and providing you with more stories.